Hello, and welcome to another edition of Revive and Thrive, Actionable Steps for Physician Dads to Combat Burnout. I'm your host, Joshua Blum. I'm a psychiatrist who's hosting this podcast and talking a little bit about burnout, things you can do as a physician dad to take a little bit of control about this in day-to-day life. We've been going through the alphabet A to Z. There's no particular rhyme or reason to that other than that it's simple and it's easy to do. With every letter, we're going to talk about, and have been talking about, a different step, a different thing you can do in your day-to-day life that you can start doing now, even if it's in a very, very small way. We did A, which was aim. We did B, which is boundary. And today is C. And C stands for company. So who we keep as company determines a lot about our outlook in life. Now, this is an expression, I don't necessarily agree with it wholeheartedly, but it is an expression nonetheless that you'll see. And it is that you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time around. So I think that it's an interesting sentiment, right? Because it determines, it says that a lot of who we end up being is because of our social connectedness. And if it's positive, then there's a good chance that we too will be positive. If you're around a lot of negative people, a lot of Eeyores and negative Nellies, then there's a good chance that you'll also be that way. There's also a chance that it might go the total opposite. Many of you may either know people or have been in this situation where you're yourself, where an environment, let's just say home environment, was not all that great. It was pretty negative. There's a lot of bad shit that happened. And because of that, and in spite of that, there was resilience, there was growth, there was a determination to not end up in the same way. So I'm not saying it always has to be that way. This is talking about optimization. This is also talking about things you can do that's examining your life as it is right now in a realistic way and saying like, okay, helpful, not helpful. It's kind of like, when way back in medical school, is you're learning different parts of the physical exam, right? The general exam. What is that really? We write it and we put NAD, no apparent distress. What does that really mean, really, in a useful way? At least the way I learned it and the way that I still think about it is this person sick or are they not sick? Do they need to go in the hospital? Or can they be managed as an outpatient? Is there something that is acutely wrong right now that needs immediate attention? Or can it wait? That kind of determination is really important, I think, to do in multiple different aspects of your life. Going back to the physical exam example, a lot of what you learn to do over the course of medical school and residency or whatever it is, fellowship and beyond, is figuring out what are the realms of normal. Because there's a really big realm there, right? A lot of things can be quote unquote normal, and when to be worried and when not to be. It's the same thing in your own life, There's going to be a lot of variation of people that you're around that other people might look at and say like, oh, this person's really negative and really toxic, but maybe that's fine for you. But there may be other things that you notice that this is a really close person. Let's say it's maybe it's even a parent or sometimes it could be even a spouse that is really kind of negative and toxic. And you may want to figure out like, okay, do I need to change my relationship with this person? There's going to be no easy answers there. This is going to be a very individual kind of thing. But if you think about, I guess the actionable thing for this particular episode is to think about who you tend to spend a lot of time with. And I would say that it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, because you may actually be more influenced by someone that is no longer even alive anymore, or someone that you don't know personally, but you listen to a lot. Let's just say like, a podcast or a radio or like, those kind of radio episode or whatever. It may be somebody that you look up to. So part of this is recognizing, again, as in episode 1, it's looking at what's actually happening, the reality of it versus where you'd like to end up. If the people that are in your life right now are primarily folks that you don't necessarily want to be spending a lot of time around, then to say like, okay, all right, is there any way I can limit that? Let's just say, I'll give you an example of let's say you have a long-standing friend. Every time they call, they are always in crisis and they rely on you for support. Now, friendships can be built on this, but often a friendship is hopefully give and take. So yes, they might be in crisis, but then you may also have had some bad stuff go down and you need their support. But if it's unilateral and they're always kind of pulling for you to provide that support, you end up depleted. One of the biggest things that comes out with burnout is this sense of being spent, depleted, that you give, and you're not really getting a whole lot in return. And As service people, we are in the business of helping other people. We do that anyway in work. And so it's not unusual for us to come home after that and be depleted. So we need some way to recharge. And if the people in your life outside of work are not providing that, or you have no way of doing that in other ways, then we just get more and more depleted. So let's go back to that example. Let's say that person is always pulling, sucking, and they're not giving a whole lot in return. Is there a way to limit the contact that you have with them? Maybe it's more of a business-like contact. Maybe it's something where you're not available as much. You don't always answer the calls. You don't respond right away to the text messages that are like, I need this urgently right now. The same thing I would say would happen with patients. They may say like, I need this urgently. I need this done immediately. If you're the front line for all those kinds of things like that, that can be very, very, very draining. You may already have some ways of managing that in day-to-day life in your work environment, but you may not necessarily have thought about that in your non-work environment. Do those same parameters hold true? They may not. The first thing is looking like, what's the reality of it? There are certain non-negotiables. Well, I would say everything is negotiable. There's certain things you may not wish to negotiate at all. You may put a priority, for example, on family time with your spouse, whatever. So that's for you, those are non-negotiables. Everybody's going to be a little bit different there. So if you put that aside, then look about what's left over. You may discover that those there's nothing really left over, and those are the people you tend to spend the most time around. So if those interactions are not necessarily positive, or they're not as positive as you would like, then thinking about, okay, like how can I change it so that it does become more positive? You may not have the ability to so easily say leave a relationship. If you're, for example, we're all fathers, young children take a lot of time and effort. That's just the nature of the game. And so is there any way to change some of those interactions so that they are a little bit more palatable to you? Maybe it's what you do. Maybe it's what you do when you're around them. Maybe it's the way that you approach certain things. For example, maybe you really hate bedtime. Maybe that's one of the things that you have to do, and you hate getting the kids ready for bed. If they're anything like my kids, they're all over the place. The hour right before bed, they just like get the zoomies and then, go totally apeshit. So if they're anything like that, that can be a very, very stressful time. That's also a time when you're probably tired. You may be thinking to yourself, Jesus Christ, I got plenty of other things to do. But is there a way to change some of that so that you can sort of help them with their task and also settle down? Maybe it's pairing off with your spouse and you each take one kid, or for example, or you alternate days, or you decide that there's something that you're going to do all together that they enjoy and that helps settle them down. I know my kids, one of the things that will instantly help my daughter was, and we've gotten into a routine of it, is we're going to read a story. And, we've gone through many, many books that way, but it's a routine and it's been part of the bedtime routine for a long time now. And it's something that we always do basically, every night. My son, who is younger, we're sort of getting into that sort of phase. So those are expected things. We all do a little bit better when we know what to expect. And so setting up some external structure there that says like, hey, these are the things that are expected. And these are the things we're going to be doing, really, regardless of whether you like it or not. I mean, it's one of those things that as a parent, you get to say like, okay, we're going to do this. Kids may not necessarily like it, but if it's something that's beneficial for them, like brushing their teeth, I mean, it's one of those things you just do, right? There may be ways to incentivize other people and yourself. So think about if you have to do something that's really unpleasant, spending time, let's say, I don't know, I'm just going to use the example. Maybe it's spending time with in-laws or spending time with people that your partner likes being around, but you're like, I could not care less, right? Then thinking about how can I make this a little bit better so that I'm not focused on the negative. Maybe it might call for some negotiation in terms of like, okay, we'll do this, but then, hey, at a different time, let's do something that's more beneficial, something that I get to pick, or something that will be beneficial to both of us. One of the things I would say often when we talk about company is the ability to, you could also foresee, instead of company, I could have picked communication, but they're really the same in many ways, because our ability to communicate and express our needs is one of those things that, again, is a huge thing that does not happen in burnout. And this is a big thing for us guys. Many of us are just not like great with words. As a psychiatrist, I can relate to this because my primary job is to listen. I don't necessarily have to explain things in a super articulate way all the time. The patient does that. So if you think about that, our ability to convey information, not just to ourselves, but to other people, is really important, because when we're frustrated, when we're not doing well, other people are not necessarily going to know. And often we hold things inside, and to the point where it starts to eat us up. Like, some people are very overt with it. They just blow up, and it's like a bomb going off. Other people, it's more like an internal explosion where you can't really tell from the outside, but the inside is devastated. Neither of which are good. The outside external kind of one is very destructive to other people around them. Yes, they may feel better in a span of a couple of minutes, but then they destroyed a bunch of stuff. The internal person, other people think everything is going great, but that person inside is dying. In either case, there's this destruction that happens. Relationships get soured, or our health suffers, none of which is great. So our ability to express these things to other people, or at least express them outwardly, so we're not retaining them inside, and we're not doing it in a way that's destructive to ourselves or other people, is really important when it comes to burnout and combating it. And again, this is one of those things, it's not a prevention thing. Everything on this podcast is focused not so much on like, okay, well, let's think about how we can prevent this from happening. Yes, all these things will actually help prevent future burnout, but they're all things that if you are burning out or you're burnout right now, you can start these right now. It's kind of like exercise. It's like, when's a good time to start exercise? Well, assuming you can move your body in some way, assuming it's not life-threatening to do so, you can start now. How? By moving. So let's recap a little bit. As I said in the very first episode, I'm just here to introduce a topic. I don't claim to have any answers. And because a lot of this is stuff that is going to be very, very individual for you. And what works for one person is not necessarily going to be workable for somebody else. So what I'm trying to do here is really just give you a lot of different options. Some things will work, some things won't. With this one, what I would think about is that think about folks in your life right now. How positive or negative are they? And who do you want to keep around? Who you do not necessarily want to keep around? And what is realistic for you to limit contact with? It may not necessarily always be realistic. But then, and here's the other part of it, think about aspirational things. Think about ideal. In the very first episode, we talked about your aim. Your aim will really determine your accomplishment, right? Will determine your altitude. So that means that there may be certain people you want to spend more time around. Maybe they're people you look up to, people that inspire you. You don't necessarily have to spend time with them physically. The same mental space is also important. Maybe there are people that you look up to in your career, in terms of your hobbies. Those are people that, especially in this day and age, if you can't necessarily find them and talk to them or reach out to them in some way, maybe you can listen to them. Maybe you can hear things that they have said. You can spend time with them sort of that way, and they can continue to inspire you in that particular way. And those people can be part of your sort of, your little circle there. Maybe there are people from past or present that are, people from the past that are no longer alive, that are historical figures or whatever that you admire. Those people count too. So I would think about the sort of having your team, if you will, a team of folks that